When this happened, she didn't say, "Honey, we need to talk." I guess I should have seen this. But like most people who are happy with their lives, I ignored the signs until they hit me. Was I too trusting? Maybe. My wife Marcy is 47 years old and I, Rick, am 48 years old. Our house has been empty for some time since our youngest son, Kyle, 18, went to college upstate. Our daughter, Rhonda, 20, is in the Navy, much to my chagrin. I'm a retired Army colonel adjusting to civilian life. If that's even possible for someone who spent almost 30 years in the Army, we are the Westons. We were at a party in the Goldsteins' backyard. Marcy tried to endure Chuck Marston talking in her ear. Chucky was probably trying to impress her with his muscles rather than his conversation. Marcy rolls her eyes, giving me the "save me" signal by scratching her nose. But I'm chatting friskily with Jenny, a single hot mom whose husband left her with 2 kids and 40 extra pounds. Well, Jenny has lost some extra pounds at the gym and is chatting in my ear about fitness or whatever. I smile at my wife, scratch my nose, and smile. She gives me the "stop talking to the big blonde and come save me if you ever want to get laid again" look. Taking Jenny's hand, I led her to my wife and muscular Chuck. Jenny lets me, but wonders why I brought her to my wife. "Chuck," I say, extending my hand to shake. "Do you know Jenny?" He's a little confused, but manages to pull himself together and reach out to Jenny. I take this opportunity to save my wife. "My hero," she says, throwing a far from cheerful look at me, although I saved her from the clutches of this scoundrel. "It took you long enough. You know Jenny's tits aren't real, right?" "Considering how much I paid for yours, I think I know," I answer. "Let's go home," she says. "I need to get to the airport early for my flight." On the way out at the gate, we passed a young Nielsen couple. Vincent Nielsen nods to make way for me, while his wife Leslie smiles politely. We had previously done the obligatory every couple talk with them, so we just walked out. For some reason, Vinny and his wife's glances in my direction seemed strange to me. It was as if she was starving and looking at her next meal. Very strange indeed. Recent years spent in intelligence have made me, a retired Army colonel, a little nervous and always wary. It's time to stop seeing conspirators in every incomprehensible glance. But I followed Marcy in hopes of sex before the trip. We are no strangers to separation, especially since I spent years flying in wars and training missions. A year in Korea almost killed our marriage, and during one of our 2 meetings, we had a fight in Hawaii and almost got divorced. Years of military life take their toll on any marriage. Separations, stress, and distractions. Yes, you get the idea. All I know is that Marcy lost her temper when I returned and we had a hard time getting back on track. But I knew something had happened this year, or someone. This is common in military marriages. The fact is that we have above-average rates of divorce and infidelity. But after many years of service, I realize how lucky Marcy and I are to still be together, even knowing that she probably cheated while I was gone. How do I know? Because Marcy and the kids moved back to our hometown while I was gone. There she got a job at a local hospital. It was near the hotel where my ex-girlfriend from high school worked as a manager. And she saw Marcy in the parking lot of the Red Roof Hotel across from the hospital. Lydia let me know when I was in Korea, but she had no proof. So I hired an investigator to follow my wife. I felt stupid when I received the report. Mercy Hospital was being renovated, and their parking lot was a construction site with only half the spaces available. So Marcy had to park in the Red Roof Hotel parking lot, as did half the nurses and orderlies. But there was a problem with time. Marcy always showed up for her shift a couple of hours early. It stopped when I returned home. If Marcy was dating someone, there was no way to find out. Lydia could be wrong or she could be right, but it was enough for me to realize that I was neglecting my wife, and Marcy could leave for another man while I was not around. There's nothing worse than wondering and not being sure. After I've been to Korea, I'll never have to go there again. A year is a long time, long enough to lose your family. I will never get back a year of lost connection with my children and their lives. And finally, the last months of our separation have changed my view that our marriage is unshakable. Who this guy could be, I will never know. We had small children then, and I wanted to save the family. Plus, Marcy seemed determined to solve our problems rather than leave. And me too. When the opportunity arose to switch to Army intelligence, I took the opportunity. This meant fewer dangerous assignments and, better yet, more time at home. So, I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan 3 times when war broke out there. But in my new capacity as an Army spy, I was relatively safe behind the lines. This calmed Marcy, but I was worried about how things were going at home. Information about many cases of failure of military marriages was heard, and I decided it was time to leave. It hurt, but I realized that Marcy and I had almost lost each other and broken our family twice. The chances of our marriage surviving if I stayed for the general's stars, which might not happen, were slim. After I retired, my consulting job made me more money than if I had stayed and become a general. But then I was in my daughter's senior year of high school, and I saw her and my son graduate, and I still had my wife. It's priceless. Marcy continued her nursing education and was now the head nurse on the hospital's surgical team. They specialized in life and death. There was a group of neurosurgeons at the hospital, but 3 stood out: an older doctor who was retiring, a woman in her 40s, and a 40-year-old new talent who had joined them this year, Dr. Trey Cardoza. I met him several times at parties. Tall, dark, and handsome, Dr. Trey was the typical narcissistic specialist surgeon. They do get a god complex after they rummage through enough brains and save a few lives. And I could tell he had a thing for Marcy, who kept herself in good shape. Yes, she had the figure of a 30-year-old woman at 47, which Dr. Trey did not fail to notice. I caught him staring at Marcy when he thought I was away. I could only imagine how he acted towards her at work when I wasn't around. And much to my disappointment, she was talking about what a great surgeon he was and how he would be the next leader of the hospital's surgical team. I was already starting to worry. The only time I brought it up, she was silent for a while before saying anything. I understand how you feel, Rick, but it's my job. I have to work with these doctors, and frankly, they are aggressive towards all of us nurses. This relieves stress in the operating room. Usually, after a very stressful moment, flirting is a relief mechanism for all of us. Then things get serious again, and no one does anything. What about the gap, Marcy? When you go to his office or have lunch, how does my wife openly flirt with another man? Do you remember how you and that CIA woman were a tight-knit team before you were sent to Iraq? Yes, but we don't, I tried to say. How do I know what you did and what you didn't do? She asked mockingly, making air quotes. I know she was in love with you before you left. I saw it in her face, Rick. If I told her I didn't mind, she would kneel in front of you. Marcy, there was nothing wrong with Deidre. That's what you say, Rick. I should have trusted you. With Deidre, so now you have to trust me. 4 months had passed since that conversation, and this question hung in the background of our lives like an ominous cloud. If they did something, they did it at work. I've been in enough hospitals to know that there were plenty of unoccupied rooms and offices for people to use and have privacy. And her Red Roof Hotel, with its 2-hour early arrival, haunted me from the past. But her words made sense. I either trusted her or I didn't. The fact is that Marcy also had reason to be suspicious. Deidre Keel actually offered herself to me in Iraq, and one day, after we survived a roadside ambush, she cornered me in an unoccupied office. After not having sex for 3 months, I gave in to her advances. She and I were thinking about going all the way when the sirens went off and the base came under mortar and rocket fire. We took this as an order to be careful and never contacted them again. At first, I felt guilty, but then I remembered what Marcy did when I was in Korea, and I told myself that if she can do it, I can do it too. It's meaningless sex, that's all. As soon as I get back, everything will be the same, and Marcy and I will be even. I was deceiving myself, and here we are. 2 cheaters married to each other discuss trust. Still, given how attentive and loving Marcy was, I decided I shouldn't be paranoid about our past. I was almost sure that she was cheating then, but almost. On the other hand, I knew that I myself was not without sin, and now their entire team was heading to South America on a Doctors Without Borders tour. Brain surgeries for poor people in 5 countries take almost 6 weeks. Marcy knew I wasn't crazy about Dr. Trey, but this trip wasn't something she would give up for the sake of her career. And I wasn't going to make waves, considering how it supported my military career. "I stayed home many times for you," she said. "Many times I didn't know if you were alive or dead, Rick. Suppose you were killed or captured like those men and women in Desert Storm. I would have to raise 2 children alone. I've done my part. Now it's your turn to wait for me." Things were a little tense this morning when she left for the airport. She spent a lot of time the previous evening packing her things and talking on the phone with her mother. I found it annoying when it invaded our intimate time that seemed less and less in recent months. Not wanting to start an argument, I went to bed and woke up the next day to her gone. No message, no goodbye kiss, and nothing more. I looked around the house in case she left a note, but I didn't find anything. Just in case, I checked my phone for messages, but there were none. To say I was annoyed and concerned about the way she left would be an understatement. I was furious. After making coffee and calming down, I looked at her flight. This was on the way to Colombia, their first stop. They'll land in a few hours, and hopefully she'll text or call from there. Well, I thought, another chapter in our marriage. Only she didn't call, didn't write, nothing like that. After double-checking to see if her flight had landed in Bogota, I wondered if I should contact her, but all I sent her was a short message. "Hope you are fine." I didn't receive an answer, not the next day, not the day after. Running has always helped me focus when I'm stressed, and this time was no different. It took all my self-control to maintain an even pace, but my frustration and anger at my wife's silence made me run faster than usual. By the time I ran the last block, I was out of breath and gasping for air. "Rick, are you okay?" asked a familiar male voice. I looked up and saw Vincent Nielsen in the yard. Their house was right behind ours, with our backyard separated by a small fence and gate that we never locked. Immediately behind him, I saw his young wife, who was on her knees fiddling with a flower bed. "Nice ass," I thought as Vinny turned to look. "Nice view, huh?" he asked with a meaningful smile. I looked away from his wife's ass and simply nodded. It was a strange situation, but my mind was too busy to process it all. "Vince," I answered. "I'm tired after a run and I need a shower. See you another time, okay?" "Of course," he replied. "Leslie and I will be happy to invite you to our place. We can fry some steaks. Bring a 6-pack of beer or some wine if it makes you feel better." "Okay," I answered. "I will let you know." "You're welcome, Rick," said the young man with a strange, knowing smile. "Okay," I said and went to my door. After a shower and a cold drink, I looked around our empty house. The TV was humming while I waited for a call from my wife. It was already dark outside, and still no call, no text, no email from Marcy. I had enough and called her at the hotel. After checking the time, I realized that it was about 10 in the evening. They sent me to her room, but there was no answer. "Sorry, senor," said the manager in good but accented English. "Looks like there is no answer." "Who am I talking to?" "Pablo Espinosa, hotel manager at your service, sir. What's your name?" "Rick Weston. Pablo, Mrs. Weston is my wife. I haven't been able to contact her since she left. Can you confirm that she checked into your hotel? Have you seen her?" "Yes, senor. Senora Weston has arrived along with all the other members of the medical team." I saw her earlier with them in the dining room. They returned from the hospital after surgery. They all looked tired. They ate and went upstairs. "Can you do me a favor, Pablo?" "Yes, sir." He was no longer so polite, but he tried. "What is Dr. Trey Cardoza's room number?" 514, senor. Do you want me to call him?" I winced when I saw that Marcy's number was 515 on the list. "Not now, Pablo." I managed to keep my cool. "One more thing. Help me, Pablo, And please call Mrs. Penny Washington's room. Penny Washington and Marcy were close. In fact, we went to dinner with her and her husband Josh last August. After some hesitation, Pablo replied, "Sí, señor, please wait." And music began to play on the phone. "Hi, Rick," Penny replied. She knew it was me. I had a feeling that Pablo told her who was calling, or did she expect this from me? It looks like that was the case. "Hi, Penny," I said. "Sorry to bother you so late." "Don't worry about it," she said. "Why are you calling me? Is Josh okay?" Ignoring the question, I took a chance. "I'll get to the point. Where is my wife now?" And indeed, several seconds passed from my question to her answer. "Why are you asking me this?" she replied, as if irritated by me, but I could tell from her tone that she knew why. "Don't fool me, Penny," I replied. "My wife's room is next to Trey's, and she's not there, and I think you know why." "Rick, I think you need to talk to your wife," she replied, but I could have sworn I heard a man's voice ask, "Who is it?" "Maybe I should talk to your husband about the man in your room, Penny. You know, I have Josh's number. I wonder what he would think if you had a man in your room away from home." She didn't say anything, but covered the phone, and when she spoke again, it was just her. "Okay, Rick, please don't do this. I beg you, don't call my husband. This is the first time—" "I don't care how many times you cheated on your husband, Penny. But if you don't tell me about my wife, I'll call your husband and let him know in a few seconds. Now post it. Where is my wife?" Phones in this hotel had the ability to transfer to phones of other rooms. Penny didn't want to transfer me, but she was very cooperative with the threat to her marriage. At least I knew she didn't have time to warn my wife. The phone rang in room 514. "Penny, why are you calling us?" I heard Trey ask, thinking he was talking to Penny. "We? Who the hell were we?" But then I understood the essence of their trip. We were my wife and Trey. Penny had her "we" with some guy. It made me wonder how many people on the surgical team were using this trip as an extramarital sex excursion. "I don't want to ruin your evening, Trey," I said in a cold voice. "But this is Rick Weston, and I want to talk to my wife." It took him a few seconds to come to his senses. He then went into stupid mode. They all do it, especially the so-called smart ones. It's all about arrogance. "Why are you asking me?" he asked in a smug tone. "Trey, if you value the surgeon's hands or your eyes, call Marcy. You understand? You're threatening? Pass the pink to my wife, you asshole." In the end, I lost my temper. Some noise was heard, similar to a struggle for the telephone. Then I heard my wife's voice. "Give me the phone, Trey." I heard her voice. I would say, "Good evening, Rick," but we both know that's not true at this point. "What are you doing in his room?" I asked, trying not to lose my composure. "Why didn't you call or answer my messages?" And again, "What are you doing in his room, Marcy? Are you having an affair with him?" She was silent for a second or two and then addressed the asshole. "Trey, can you leave for a few minutes?" She told him before he grumbled something obscene. "Thank you, Trey." After that, for several long seconds, neither of us said a word. I tried to pull myself together. She spoke first. "Rick, I didn't think we'd have this conversation or that it would be tonight, but I think we should do it." I was silent. A trick I learned from investigators. Once criminals are caught, they want to confess or build up their defense. "Rick, I was a good wife, mother to our children, and everything I was supposed to be for us. I've done all this for years. Okay, I'll be back home in 6 weeks and we can talk about where we're going next. But please, just this once, this time away from you, give it to me. Just this once, if you don't mind." "If I don't mind?" I repeated, almost in shock. Nerves. "I plan to call you in a couple of days." After you and Trey had sex?" I snapped back. "How convenient." "After you and Nielsen get together," Marcy answered. "Have you already talked to them?" "They invited me to dinner." "For what?" "This is more than dinner, Rick," Marcy said. "Leslie wants you. She wants you to rock her world." I talked to her about it, and it's okay if you do. I'm not exactly an angel here, either. Yes, I can say that, Marcy. 24 years of marriage, and this is how you check out. You didn't even have the decency to tell me, honey, we need to talk in person. Rick, all that could happen is to start an argument before I leave. You think so? I answered sarcastically. But then I could ask you to stay and not leave. I could stay, Rick, she said, her voice breaking. But I wanted it. I need this at least once in my life before I get old. I need this at least once to feel alive. Just one time to feel like a professional woman. On your own. Look, when you were in the army all those years, you were alone, and you were judged by your profession. I want the same. As for Trey, that's the icing on the cake, Rick. I do not love him. For God's sake, he's just a fuck toy. And I did leave Leslie for you, right? Other wives leave behind casserole. Did you leave me a woman? She chuckled nervously. What can I say? I take care of my husband. What the fuck, Marcy? Rick, she just turned 30. 30, Rock? You're 48. I'm giving you a 6-week hall pass with our 30-year-old roommate. Rick, how many women like Leslie are knocking on our door? So, you got me a woman while you deal with Dr. Trey. How thoughtful of you, Marcy. Sorry if I don't thank you. 6 weeks. 6 weeks and we'll be together again. I won't ask you what happened, and neither will you. Do you understand this? I understand everything, I answered. I love you, Rick. I heard her voice. I loved you too, Marcy. But now I'm not sure about that. I hung up, not wanting to prolong our pointless and painful conversation. The bell rang. I went to open the door to see Leslie. Good evening, Rick, she said with a dazzling smile. I noticed that she was alone, without her husband. Hi, Leslie, I answered nervously. My eyes looked at her because she looked amazing. Leslie wore minimal makeup, just enough to highlight her face, framed by medium to short-length blonde hair. Pink lipstick with matching eyeshadow, a floral print sundress enveloped her hourglass figure. There's something about heels that makes a woman's legs appear longer and her calf muscles appear more defined. It was a young and healthy look that attracted me more than the slutty outfits that some women think turn men on. Are you going to let me in? She grinned, raising an eyebrow. Of course, I said, stepping aside so she could go into the kitchen. I stared at her body for so long that I didn't notice that she had brought a bottle of wine with her. She handed it to me and smiled. Red Moscato. How did she know I liked it? Then a light bulb came on above my head. Marcy. My wife told her what to bring. I was hoping you wanted company. I don't know how good company I'll be, Leslie, but I want to ask you something. Where is Vincent? I asked, refraining from calling him Vinny, as everyone in the area called him. He went out with his friends to play cards. In my mind, I thought about how her husband had left his young wife alone. How many times was Marcy alone? How many times have I left her to her fate, alone to give in to temptation? So Marcy went to South America, she said as I poured her a glass. Have you heard anything about her? Funny you should ask. I was just talking to Marcy when you knocked. Oh, sorry, Rick. Did I interrupt? No, not at all. We said almost everything that needed to be said. She probably sensed my terrible mood. Rick, I think we need to talk. Let's sit down, I said, pointing to the living room. What did she tell you? That should have been my question. Why don't you start? I was hoping Marcy would talk to you before she left. Really? No, I had to play telephone games with her, only to find out that my wife is hiding out with her doctor boyfriend in South America. Then she told me to talk to you. So let's stop playing this game and tell me what you and her planned before she left. Leslie nodded, then took a long sip from her glass. Some time ago, we met her in a shopping center. We kind of hit it off and had a drink in our backyard one day. I don't know where you and Vincent were that day. But you know us, girls and booze. Soon I was chatting about my marriage and my husband's weird quirks. She paused, as if trying to decide what to say next. But I just looked back without saying anything. And, of course, she continued. You see, Rick, my husband, loves to share with me. Shall I share with you? I asked, a little confused before I realized what she meant. "Oh, do you mean with other men?" She finished my sentence. "Exactly. Interesting," I managed to blurt out. "And as far as I understand, you told Marcy about this?" I was tipsy and... Rick, can I be honest? Certainly. I find you attractive. Don't get me wrong, but I like older men. I'm flattered that I fit your type. But why tell my wife about this? Because I wanted her to know and let me shoot you. Well, how did my wife cope with this? I was surprised that she just listened and didn't say anything, Leslie continued. Nothing? At first, of course. She was a little shocked at first, I think. She asked me to explain how this was happening between me and Vince. I explained, and she seemed to be thinking about something because her gaze clouded over. Well, Marcy never discussed this with me, I said. So, Marcy never talked to you about this? You know, about you and me? Actually, she dropped a bomb on me over the phone right when you arrived. Tonight? She seemed surprised. By phone? Wow. I took a sip, too, and nodded. Rick, you said you found out about her and her doctor friend this evening? I wouldn't call a man a gentleman who sleeps with another man's wife. I agree, she said. My husband shares with me, but I never act behind his back. So Vincent knows you're here? Certainly. My husband knew I liked you ever since you moved into our neighborhood. I haven't had a regular lover for a long time, and I was looking for him. Do you have regular boyfriends on the side? I only had one of these before. This went on for 2 years. But mostly we go out of town and meet men. Vincent finds them online, and we meet them for dinner or drinks. If I like them, we go to our room.